As if this year hasn't provided enough challenges, let's throw one more shrimp on the barbie, shall we? Of course, I'm talking about open enrollment. It's just going to look different this year for employees as companies are adapting still to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, nevertheless, the goal really should remain the same. We want to educate our employees on their benefit offerings. We want to boost enrollment and utilization, and ultimately retain employees with a really good, thorough benefits package. That's the crux of our discussion this week on the Benefits Buzz podcast is how can you ensure that your employees are informed and educated in this new work environment? Heck, what do we know about learning styles of adults to help them make better decisions about open enrollment? And lastly, maybe most importantly, what are some really unique virtual options you can implement this year? Can't wait to dive into it, and I have two wicked smart colleagues on the show this week. Mandy Finke, Senior Marketing Communications Manager, is joined by Jess Almley, the Vice President of Learning Experience. It's going to be a goodie. My name is Eric Piella, the host of the Benefits Buzz podcast, and I am joined by my co-host, Kelsey Burgad. Let's dive in. Can't wait to see what this week's buzz is all about. It's the most wonderful time of the year. No, I'm not talking about the holidays. I'm talking about open enrollment season. Isn't that right, Kelsey?
Yeah, I don't know if HR people quite feel the same way about open enrollment as you and I do, but definitely just keep singing because that'll definitely increase our viewership.
Yeah, there was a bet how many episodes in until I sang. I guess I made it one episode or two now, whatever it is. So whoever lost, pay up. So, but we are talking about open enrollment. It is a crazy time of year, I know, for HR professionals. And yikes, this season will look maybe a little different than others in the past. And so we wanted to bring on some experts in learning and some experts in open enrollment to talk about what we have in store and maybe what some things HR professionals can think about doing when they prepare themselves for this open enrollment. So I'm excited to have two guests on the show today. We have Mandy Finke, who is the Senior Marketing Communications Manager at WEX, and Jess Almley, Vice President of Learning Experience at WEX. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thanks, Eric and Kelsey. Excited to be here.
Yes, thank you. I'm really excited to talk about open enrollment.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about your roles and how you both have been involved in open enrollment in the past.
Yeah, I can kick that off. Thank you. As Eric mentioned, my name is Mandy Finke, and as a Senior Marketing Communications Manager, a large part of my role is to make sure that we have tools and resources for all of our customers to help support open enrollment, which in my mind really means being able to explain a benefit to an employee so that they can understand it and see the value in enrolling in that plan during their open enrollment window.
Awesome. And Jess, you've been to, I don't even know how many open enrollment fairs. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in OE?
Sure, I can. Well, and I'll tell you a little bit about my role first because I think it plays off of Mandy's. So I'm the Vice President of Learning Experience for WEX, and I'm overseeing strategy for learning throughout the organization. And that's where my expertise lives. So as Mandy says, open enrollment is about getting the information out to the folks. Well, my bent on that is how do we get it to them so they learn about it and understand it and really can take full advantage of it? In terms of open enrollment, my team has been involved in delivering webinars, creating videos for open enrollment. And yes, I've also been myself to many different open enrollment fairs throughout the country, traveling and meeting folks where they're at.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that, majority of open enrollment in the past, or at least what it feels like from our perspective, is a lot of travel, right? You're going to those open enrollment fairs and helping those HR teams get the booth set up, get everything ready for those employees to come around and check out all the different benefits that they have available to them. But this year is probably going to look a little bit different. With COVID-19, we might not be in person this year. And in fact, probably majority of the people listening today are trying to figure out what the heck they're going to do for open enrollment this year. So, what have we seen in the past as far as what's been successful for open enrollment, and what are we looking at this year as far as success goes?
Yeah, I'll start if that's okay with Mandy. This is Jess. I think, interestingly enough, in terms of successful, I don't know that open enrollment has always been successful, even in the way that we've done it in the past. And I think that's just both from my own in-person experience and just from what I know about how people learn and take in information. So typically, yes, we have seen those open enrollment in-person fairs where our HR colleagues are working hard to set up an event that their employees can go to, or maybe they're even setting up a webinar. And both of those, I don't know that they've been as successful as they could be. In fact, I think one of the things that COVID makes possible is a way for us to think about this, about open enrollment differently, and hopefully make it even more impactful. You know, when you talk about an open enrollment fair and you're talking about a one-person event that someone's going to, there is not an open enrollment fair where everyone in the company will make it there. It's just, that's the reality, is it's an event. It happens at a specific time. And if you are out of the office or you can't get away from your workstation at that point, you're not going to be able to go there. In my experience, even we don't get a ton of questions, even at open enrollment fairs. People kind of scurry through so they can get back to the rest of their day. They pick up the handouts and the swag, whatever fun thing that booth is giving away. And then they think, all right, I'll think about this later. And I don't know that that's the best strategy for getting information to people in a way that really helps them to learn and understand it. I also think webinars, what we've seen in the past is those tend to be a one and done event as well. And even if we record them, the chances that I'm going to take 30 to 60 minutes to go back and listen to that webinar are pretty slim, just because of the limited time that we all have available. And we also haven't seen a ton of interaction. You know, we have a webinar because we think people will be able to ask questions. And really, we haven't seen a lot of questions that come through in webinars. I think people are distracted by other things going on. They don't have the questions in that moment, or they don't feel comfortable asking them in that webinar group setting where they don't know really who else is on the line. So that's what I'd say I've seen as common. I don't know if it's necessarily been successful. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what could be successful in the future. Mandy, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think certainly everybody recognizes that this year is going to be completely different because of COVID and the pandemic, and every state having different restrictions. There are so many companies that have gone to a work from home model, that have implemented social distancing guidelines. So the reality is we won't have those in-person events. So having the tools and resources for our employers to do this differently and helping providing guidance, I think, is going to be a really crucial moment and pivotal. You know, you're absolutely right. Like, just having a certain point in time where I can go and walk around to booths. And I personally, even with WEX, right? I went down and I literally went from table to table, grabbed some swag and kind of walked away. And I did grab some pamphlets. But the point of time that I needed to like review that information and actually make a decision was when I was at home with my husband and looking at my spouse's options, you know, for benefits and what those were in comparison to mine. So thinking that doing something and providing information once in a group setting is really the way to get benefits information across to employees, I think is maybe a miss. And I think we have now the greatest opportunity to find a different and better way to present benefits information.
I love that we're seeing this as an opportunity. It's so interesting that you all are talking about this as, hey, maybe this has been a miss in the past and it hasn't been super successful. So what I'm hearing you say is that maybe it wasn't successful because people are going to those in-person OE fairs, but ultimately it comes down to that actually sitting down, reading the material, you know, watching that recorded webinar, and making the best decision for me versus, you know, we all sign up for those webinars and we have the best intentions, but how much attention are we really paying to those? So
hey, now I've never multitasked during a webinar before.
Never. I bet if we looked at that attention percentage, Eric, yours would be pretty low. But what does success look like in the future for us when it comes to open enrollment? How do we gauge that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Kelsey. And, you know, one thing, you know, if we define like what is success for open enrollment, and I would say if I'm an HR professional, success for me for open enrollment is being able to present benefits information for employees so that they can clearly understand their benefits options and to make decisions. And I would say that happens in a variety of different ways. One is, and Jess, certainly, you're the expert on this, but everybody learns in different ways. Some people want a handout. Some people want a short little video. And honestly, like if I am looking for information on a topic, I'm going to go to Google and search it. So how do we make it that simple to find information? And then how do we make sure we're presenting the information they need to really make that decision? And that's something that we really honed in on with our own open enrollment tools and resources too, is what do I need to know to enroll in this plan versus like post open enrollment when I'm enrolled. And now what do I need to know in order to use this plan?
I love that. So I'm curious, as you kind of thought about those things, and I'm sure a lot goes into like, how do you approach creating these resources and understanding how people learn and take action? What are you hearing? Like, what are you hearing right now from employers and from other individuals curious about open enrollment? Like, what are some of the questions you're getting, and how do you start to listen, or how have you sort of kind of gathered your intel to figure out what they might be looking for, or what might spawn them to take action?
Yeah, I think part of that is thinking even of ourselves as people who would enroll in these plans. But certainly we have several different listening systems across our organization, right? So we think about the topics that employees would call in and ask about. We took a hard look at the content, even within like a handout. And what were we talking about? Did we make it simple? Did we relate these plans to an everyday experience? I mean, a great example of that would be if you're enrolled in a flexible spending account and you use those FSA funds now on a approved over-the-counter medication, you can save 30%. If you're thinking of that 30% tax bracket, you can save 30% on those costs. That is very relatable. But I think you really need to step back when you think about successful OE. How do you communicate that? How do you make it simple? Again, thinking of making it relatable to your everyday life, but you have to communicate early. So in my recommendation would be, don't start planning and communicating at least a month in advance of your open enrollment window, and making sure that you communicate probably even like once a week and in different forms. So if you do have a handout that you're sharing, can you also like use Zoom and do a quick video and explaining the differences and what their plans are from last year to this year? Can you include a short video, that explains, is educational about what the plan is and how it works? Again, providing a variety of different ways for people to consume the content and making sure that you present it more than once and in a variety of different ways. So maybe it's a month and a half out and you're like, hey, don't forget open enrollment's coming, and you have an intranet site and all your resources posted there, because at the end of the day, people want to look and read this information when it's convenient for them. And when it makes sense for them. So maybe it's when they're at home, maybe it is over their lunch hour, or maybe it's early in the morning or late at night. So being able to have that information readily available for any time of the day so that they have time to sit down, digest, and understand, here's my benefit options and here's what I want to enroll in next year.
So I love that. I love that you're thinking through how, not are people consuming their information. It's like, I think we take for granted, especially here, right? Like we understand benefits, we know what they're about. And I think sometimes the other individuals, that can be confusing. So not only do you have to create the right resources and the right type of, way to present them, but they also have to understand how people are going to look at them and learn. And I think, Jess, I love your thoughts on like, when we're creating these materials, we have to understand how people process and how they make decisions and what information they need to be, to make the right decision for their benefit. So what can you tell us about, gosh, just so nerdy, but like almost adult learning, right? Like, I mean, that's really what we're talking about here, right? Like, how do we communicate in a way that, that helps individuals make the most educated decision when it comes to the benefits?
Yeah. And I love that you call that nerdy. I like to say we all have nerdisms. This is definitely one of mine. So we can talk about learning and nerdiness all day in my book. So I think, first we have to think about just even how we learn. And we, meaning just you and I and Kelsey and Mandy, and how do we learn what we need to know? And I like to break it down to think about, how do we learn what we need to know outside of work? Because sometimes I think we try to put workplace learning in a box and it doesn't do us any favors, because then it doesn't align with the rest of our life. So Kelsey, I know you and I were talking about something earlier, just something that you had learned on your own at home because you needed to in the moment. Can you tell that
Oh
story
man.
a little and then I'll relate it back?
I mean, I wasn't hoping to share this with the country, but yeah, my husband was gone, and sometimes the yard just needs to be weed whipped, and he wasn't getting it done. So I went out there and I was trying to figure out how to use my weed whipper, and I, for the life of me, could not figure out how to make those little strings come out so I could do this job. And so I read the document, still couldn't figure it out. So you know what? I YouTubed it, and I had to watch the video 3 or 4 times, but I figured out how to weed whip the yard.
Yeah, I love that because honestly, that is exactly how all of us learn in our daily lives right now. The top 2 tools for learning right now are Google search and YouTube, which I'm pretty sure you've used both of them. And probably all of us could say at least one time in probably the past week that we've at least used Google search or YouTube to find something. And that there's a couple of different reasons why that works. I like to call it the 3 M's: motivation, manipulation, and minutes. So motivation is we are always most motivated to learn something at our moment of need. So the moment that you needed to replace the spool, Kelsey, on the weed whipper was the moment that you needed to know. And that's when you were most motivated to learn it. You can watch it that moment then, whenever you need it, whenever you think of it. You don't have to wait for the class, in air quotes, to learn. You don't have to schedule time for it. So therefore, your motivation is at its peak right then, which is when you want to tap into. So YouTube then is at your fingertips, or Google search, or whatever it is. Likely when we go back to the OE fair, we're probably not most motivated to learn about our benefits at the time of the fair because we've got other things going on. That isn't the moment that we need to know it and we need to make the decision. So to Mandy's point, she's more when she talked about needing to be motivated to learn that when she was at home, sitting down with her husband and looking over all her benefits. That's when that YouTube type solution works best. The second M was manipulation. So you, Kelsey, you could take that YouTube video and you could manipulate it as you needed to in a way that worked for you. You could really personalize it to a certain degree because you could play it faster or slower. You replayed it multiple times. I heard you say you had more than one chance. My guess is you probably paused it a couple times at certain points in the video, even to see exactly how to do something, because that's what most of us end up doing. And so we can manipulate that learning to really personalize it to ourselves and how fast or slow we need to learn it, to what level of detail. So what questions do I have? I can go right to that piece. I can look at or read that piece a couple different times. So that's another way that is how we're learning outside of work right now. And then the third thing I say is minutes, just because I wanted a third M. But basically, because that's always better. But basically, it's quick. So I don't have to sit through an hour of learning when I can get the info in a few minutes or less at the moment of need. It doesn't waste my time. So it's effective and efficient. It's what I need to know, when I need to know it, as quick as possible. In the learning world, in the working world, we call this learning in the flow of work. It's more efficient, more effective. But in the rest of the world, we just call it figuring out what we need to know when we need to know it. So when we're thinking about how to make open enrollment successful, how can we get employees the information they need when they are most motivated to learn it? So at the moment that they need it, in a way that they can dive into it in their own level of detail, so they can manipulate that information to the degree they need, and in a way that doesn't take too long. So it's not taking them hours and hours to learn it. So that's when I think about learning, I think really about, well, how is someone going to best consume this information when they need to consume it? So how can we make that available to them?
Yeah, we are such creatures of like, I want to know this right now. I'm not going to wait. How does it make this easy for me? Right? Like, that's everyone.
Yeah, we can nerd out on learning anytime. That was super fascinating. The 3 M's of learning. So what I need to know now, because I'm sure there's a lot of HR professionals going, okay, I don't know anything about that. So what does that mean? So I love that you've thought that through. What does that look like then? So what have we done? Maybe if we look at ourselves, what have we done differently at WEX?
Yeah, I certainly happy to play into that. Jess, feel free to chime in too. But I'm thinking of Jess's specific example, right? Like I'm motivated to learn it. It's on my own time, not on my employer's time. I want to be able to manipulate it, start it, stop it, click here, click there. I think that is where like having all the information in one place for me to go and play around with it and interact with it on my own terms is going to be really important. An example of that would be our virtual open enrollment fair. So we are creating this virtual OE fair that employees can go to and play around. And we're kind of mimicking what it would be to be in person at a fair. You walk into the building, our welcome page. Maybe there's an auditorium you can sit down and watch like a video, but let's make it short, right? And to Jess's point, I can start it, stop it, I can go back to it. And we're even creating a virtual like interactive booth where you can go into the booth and click on different hotspots. And maybe I want to download this PDF that talks more about what a flexible spending account is and those perks to me so I can review it later, maybe with my husband when I'm looking at his plan versus my plan. So that's one way that we're really making that interactive. And to get more to the point of like maybe a Google search, we're actually going to play into our knowledge base that we have. So if an employee wanted to, they can go in there and search a certain topic, like maybe flexible spending account contribution limits. And there the article pops up for me. So really playing into those different experiences and being able to, again, on my own time, when I'm motivated, go and manipulate the information to help me understand, okay, here's my benefits options and here's what I want to enroll in.
I think the other thing we've done, Mandy, is to get really focused in on what's the message that an employee would need right now. So let's not tell them everything they need to know. Let's tell them what they need now, and then we'll tell them the next thing later. So what that means for us, as we've done a lot of talking about this, Mandy and I have, is separating pre-open enrollment versus post-open enrollment education materials. So before, at the beginning, when I'm looking at my benefit options, I just need to know the information I need in order to make the decision. So I don't necessarily need to know how to use that benefit at this point in time. And when I'll give an example of an FSA, for example. What is it that about an FSA? What are the reasons why I might choose to enroll in an FSA? That's what I need to know right now. I don't necessarily need to know how later on to file a claim or to submit a receipt for substantiation. And if I tell you all of that information now and say it's October, November, which is when a lot of open enrollment's happening, I likely am not going to need to submit a receipt or file a claim for 4 to 5 months. And so the chances that I'm going to remember that level of detail from 4 to 5 months ago are nil to none, unless you are unlike me and have this incredible memory for all things. By the time it's 4 to 5 months, I'm going to need a reminder as to that. So let's not clutter up your mind at that point with that information, because that just complicates it more. Let's give you what you need to know, when you need to know it in order to take your next step. And then we'll fill in the blanks later when they're needed. So that's another thing I know that we looked at pretty in depth when we were looking at the materials for this open enrollment season was how can we make sure we're giving employees what they need to know at this point in time, but not so much information that it overcomplicates it.
So good. So good. I love those examples. Thank you for sharing those. As long as we're talking about kind of ideas and maybe what we've done, and this is sort of a standard question that I think all experts get, but we love to know about best practices. Right. So I know there's not maybe a one size fits all, but, if we could think about, put yourself in the shoes of the HR professionals listening, what would you outline as sort of where would you start or what would you build for an open enrollment kind of campaign or strategy this year? And what might that look like?
Yeah, I think from a best practice standpoint, again, especially with employees working remotely, communication is more important than ever. Don't see this as a hurdle and think, you know what, well, I'll just send some stuff out there and we'll talk more about what their plans are after they enroll. I think it's more important than ever to make sure that you get information to your employees about their benefit options and how these plans can really benefit them, what their eligible expenses are under an FSA. I mean, we're thinking about preparedness right now. These plans are perfect for that. So making sure that, you focus in on that communication piece. You have a regular cadence of communications. You have clear directions for them. And then the easy to understand information is so critical. Having it on an intranet site or a source of truth where they can go out to at any point in time will be super important. But I would say, don't use this as almost an excuse not to put more time and energy into it. I think it's a perfect opportunity to reevaluate, try something new, send out more communication, more thoughtful communication, and really nail it out of the park, because I think this might be the future of what open enrollment looks like.
Oh, I love that. I hope everyone's a challenge accepted out there listening. I hope people do. Look at it that way, and I appreciate those insights there. You mentioned something I think earlier in your comment, and I want to go back to it. You talked about sort of this concept of a virtual open enrollment fair, and I would love for you to kind of what does that even mean? What does that look like? Am I an avatar going around, through the internet? Or can you kind of describe what this virtual open enrollment fair would look like? Are they videos? Sort of kind of paint them a picture of what it would mean to kind of, have one of those or put one on.
Yeah. So there are a lot of different platforms out there that can help you do a virtual open enrollment experience or fair. Some are very common, I think it's called Jellyvision. And they, this little avatar walks you through your different benefits information. Now, maybe that's not an option for you, but it could be as simple as creating a little website that has information for employees. And as I mentioned, you can kind of really play off of maybe what it's like to be in person. So you have that main page and you really outline the intent of what you want that employee to do or to get away from the site once they've gone through and interacted with it. Maybe you do have a page that's like your auditorium. You have your videos, these short, easy to digest videos that they can start and stop on that auditorium page that they can watch. Maybe then you plan, there's options out there to build out these virtual interactive booths that you literally feel like you're in front of someone. And each within the booth, there's these little spots you can click on and you can download that content. So maybe that's your PDFs, or maybe there's another short video over there. Chat, you can integrate chat into those experiences as well. Maybe you have an HR team, kind of staffing that, or they can just send you a chat to follow up via email. Having contact information, really just, as I mentioned too, having a way to search content on there. Maybe it's a knowledge base of information. That's another way to play into that. So you're just thinking about all those different experiences that you might have had in person, but then turning them into an online experience. And again, making sure that information's out there and easy to digest and grab and manipulate.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of information out there as Mandy's talking and a lot of different options. I think the main key is to have one place where your employees can go to find all the other information. So as long as you have a central sort of place, it could be as exciting as it looks like a booth. It looks like an open enrollment fair with booths and there's software out there to help you do that. Or it could just be it could just be one web page in your intranet site where everything is located that you need to go to. I think there's different levels of complexity based on your different levels of time and effort available.
Mandy, Jess, thanks so much for all this great information. It sounds like we've come a long way with open enrollment this year. To our listeners, all of those HR teams out there, we do have some more podcast episodes coming up later this season where we're going to talk directly to your employees. So about open enrollment, why should you enroll in commuter? Why is an HSA right for you? And we're going to dig deeper into FSAs, the medical FSA, limited independent care. So look out for those episodes coming up later this season. And thanks for joining us.
WEX is in the business of simplifying benefits for everyone. Now, although we certainly hope our podcast sparks some aha moments, that was pretty cool, but of course we cannot provide legal, investment, or financial advice. And, therefore, nothing shared in this podcast should be interpreted as such. We encourage you to seek out appropriate professional advice regarding your plans. Hey, congratulations! You made it through our disclaimer. Thanks for listening.